Welcome into episode 358 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, the Bruins are off to a 3-2-1 start. Their most recent loss came in Utah against the Utah Hockey Club. They fell in overtime, 2-1. Right now, the Bruins sit in Nashville. They're trying to get their practice time in before they take on a desperate Predators team.
Before they go down Broadway, and I'm pretty sure they're probably not going to have the happiest Nashville trip. If they had won in Utah, maybe, but
I was
I'm
just
not
gonna
sure
say
this
that,
is going to be
Bridget.
one of those let's go out on the town until 3 a.m. Nashville trips.
Well, if anything, their night to do that was Sunday because they actually do have Monday off. So if they were going to get that in, they already did, and now starting
And now
Monday
they're all
night,
hungover right
better
now.
be back to business.
As we record at 10 a.m. on Monday, they're rolling out of bed right now.
Yeah, it's a good
not.
point because I don't think there was a happy coaching staff. So even if they had that Sunday buffer to have a good time, it's one of those things where like maybe they did just to kind of maybe drink away some issues on the ice. But yeah, it hasn't been pretty, guys. So we can hop right into the opening shifts. Despite their record being decent, it hasn't been pretty on the ice.
Yeah, and by the way, they were actually originally not going to practice Sunday either, and they added in a practice in Utah before they left, which I know will tie more into Bridget's opening shift. But mine is about the offense because we continue to see them get next to nothing from their second and third lines. Even the top line has now gone quiet for a few games. Zacho, Lindholm, and Pasternak. And we'll get into all of that. I want to bring in some numbers here on just kind of how dire this has been at 5-on-5, because I think if you pull up NHL.com and you go to stats and you look at goals per game, Bruins are 10th, 3.5 goals per game. And you think, hey, that's not bad. Actually, that's pretty good, right? But I think if you watch them, like, we know they're having their bacon saved by the fourth line night after night, and the rest of it has not looked good. And if you look at 5-on-5 stats, it's pretty bad. Like that, they are actually spending some time in the offensive zone. They are above average in offensive zone time, but they're doing nothing in there. So I will remind you that there are 32 teams in the NHL. 5-on-5 shot attempts per 60 minutes. Bruins ranked 31st. Shots on goal per 60 minutes. Bruins ranked 32nd, dead last. And so maybe you're thinking, well, Scott, Jim Montgomery has told us many times that they're a quality, not quality, not quantity team. Okay, so let's look at quality. Scoring chances at 5-on-5. Bruins rank 30th. High danger chances. Bruins rank 30th. So they are right now, like what's really saving them is they are 5th in shooting percentage. So unless you think that they are just a team full of snipers that's going to keep burying shots from, the dots or further away, like Cole Koepke beating a goalie 5-hole from, a little outside the right dot. This is actually like even worse than I think that it looks on the surface, because they're not getting quantity or quality right now at 5-on-5, and that desperately needs to change. And to me, Brian, you brought this up in the last podcast, but like I think ramp up the quantity and the quality will follow. Like, again, as I said, they actually have had some offensive zone time. They're just not doing anything with it. And I think they have to get into a mindset of just throw more pucks on net and see what starts to happen. Like, worry about working for better quality later.
And I'll go next. So my opening shift is, Scott kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, is that after that Saturday breakdown, giving up a lead, and ended up getting 1 point instead of 2 against Utah, the Bruins end up having a practice on Sunday. And some of the reporters that were there were asking, did they get what they wanted out of the practice? And coach said it was a very vocal practice on Sunday. And what they were working on the most was puck pressure. And one of the things Montgomery said he didn't like besides that was just the speed of the team from the beginning to now. Like so far through 6 games, he doesn't like the speed of the team compared to his first 2 seasons where he thought that they got off to strong starts. I mean, record-wise, obviously they did both of the years that he's been here, but they also just looked faster by this point in the year, the last 2 seasons, and that's why you can see him getting frustrated in that game against Utah and having to try to push different buttons this year than maybe he did in the past. And I know that leads right into yours, Brian.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a stark difference between Monty's first year as Bruins head coach and what is the beginning of his 3rd year as Bruins head coach, which happens to be the final year of his contract, currently, where he's not under. There's no contract extension in place at this moment here on October 21st. And his first year, he comes into a team that, even though there were doubters in the beginning of the season about the Bruins not even making the playoffs that year, that all got silenced quickly. But you look at that roster, you had David Krejci, Patrice Bergeron, Nick Foligno, Brad Marchand. Right there, you have 4 player coaches that if things go awry, don't worry, coach, we got it. We'll talk to them. Okay. Those buffers are no longer there besides Brad Marchand. And ironically enough, it was Marchand who got the the blunt of Montgomery's frustration in the Utah game that Bridget just alluded to. And so I want to bring up the dynamic between Jim Montgomery right now in more of a bad cop role and his players who, for just to stick with the analogy, seem to be resisting arrest a little bit with what his message is. And, against Utah, Brad Marchand up a goal, 3rd period. He tries to go through 2, 3, 4 Utah players at the attacking blue line. No help behind him. He gets stripped. They go down. They score. Goals called back for offsides. Monty lets him have it. Obviously, Brad Marchand knows a thing or two about how to play hockey. He's a Stanley Cup champion. He's a captain in the NHL. He's had success at the international level, and he's a future Hockey Hall of Famer, potentially. He knows better than to turn a puck over in that situation. You get that puck back down low, and you avoid a turnover at all costs. So when Montgomery flips out a Marchand there, it's kind of clearly a culmination of feelings and emotions that Montgomery has been feeling, probably dating back to points at last season through training camp and the start of this year, where there's definitely some sort of gap between what Monty is trying to have them play and what's happening during games. And I'm wondering if Montgomery is feeling the pressure of coaching in his final year of his contract actively without an extension in place. And somebody mentioned to me online that regardless of coaching style, you do have to probably yell at one point or another to get your message through. And I agree. I loved seeing Monty lean into Marchand there. I guess the question I have is what happens if that message doesn't get through, right? And where do things go if they continue to struggle? So it's something to keep an eye on. Again, they're 3-2-1. It's early in the season, but it's just something to keep an eye on if struggles continue.
It was certainly rare, right? Like that's not a scene on the bench that we've seen in the past 2 seasons all that much, especially not the first year. I feel like the first year, I don't know if he even had to do that once or even attempted to do that once because he had Bergeron just talk to the guys on the bench and kind of was more hands off with it. But that was definitely when I watched it. When you watch the replay of it, he goes right at Marchand and like pushes him on the shoulder, and I couldn't read his lips. I tried. I don't know if any of you have any idea what he said, but yeah, he straight up like went right at him, screamed at him. Marchand kind of looking away, opposite direction, but I mean, obviously Marchand knows he messed up and got lucky that it got called back. But the Bruins, managed to blow the lead again later in the 3rd. So
yeah, I think Montgomery saw an opening there where you can do that to Marchand and he's going to handle it and respond the right way. And you can kind of use your captain as an example to the rest of the team. Like this is it's kind of the classic, we heard for years, like Belichick would walk into a Monday morning meeting and pull up a mistake Tom Brady made and rip Tom Brady. And like, that would just set the tone for the rest of the team. Because it's like, well, yeah, you're not going to pick on the backup linebacker, or in this case, a 3rd liner or 3rd pairing defenseman. like when your captain makes that mistake, you lay into him, A, because you expect better from your captain, but B, because he can handle it. And he's going to be, I think, if I know Brad Marchand, he's going to be okay with being made an example of. And because Jim Montgomery is not really just sending a message to Marchand, like it's directed at him, but that's a message to the whole team of like, wake the F up, guys. So when you go at the captain, like that gets everyone's attention. So no, I think it was a good move by Montgomery. Brian, I do think it's fair to wonder, like, is he, feeling more pressure? Like, does that happen if he has an extension already? Or, probably doesn't happen if the team's playing a little better and this is just a one-off. But we've seen too many plays like that this season, not necessarily just from Martian, but from the whole team of guys not protecting the puck and just not being smart with it. And I think that's a big point of frustration is like just like guys need to make the right play and need to know how to manage games. And they've not been doing that. And that was a very prominent example of it. That almost they ended up blowing the lead anyways, but in that case almost directly cost them the lead.
Yeah, and it's absolutely what you said, Scott. It wasn't because of the one play in particular. It was a lot of circumstances coming to a boiling point. It's a coach who he's saying the right things before and after games to the media. Okay, the way he wants his team to play, we hear what he says to us and to fans, but you don't see it on the ice. Again, I know it's early in the season and teams get off to slow starts like we've said all along, I would rather the team struggle in October with their team game and get it to where it wants to be than opposed to getting off to a strong start when everybody's trying to figure their shit out, and then playoffs come around and the Bruins are kind of plateaued. So this is not an uncommon occurrence for even teams that end up winning a Stanley Cup or going far. Now, there might be a lot of people out there who say, "Okay, Brian, that's great, but I don't like their personnel right now, and I don't think their personnel is good enough." And that remains to be seen. I think you're looking at a roster that is it's no worse than last year, and so I mean, you could say that they lost to Brusque, but they also got Lindholm. Like the personnel is no lesser than it was last year. If anything, it's greater. So, but to keep it to the Montgomery thing, yeah, he sees Marchand make that play, and my question is, Scott, you mentioned how Marchand is the guy to do it to, and I absolutely agree with you. But what if Marchand's reaction is, buddy, get the fuck out of my face, like don't embarrass me in front of my teammates. I've won a Stanley Cup in this league. I'm a proven veteran. Like, talk to me after the game. I know what I did wrong there. And the reason I say that is because it wasn't just Monty like with his arms crossed being like, Marsh, you wake up. It was he's cussing at him. He goes over. He even gives him a little nudge. Now, I want to say this for the record. I'm glad he did it. Marchand deserved that. I'll be honest with you, but I'm curious if Marchand didn't take a liking to it, because we don't know for sure. I think his character would say he's okay with it, but what if he wasn't? And what if Monty's just looking around at his team and practice after practice, video session after video session, he's telling them what he wants and he's just not seeing it. And he's like, what the hell is going on here? And sir, I'm in the last year of my contract.
Then I think that'd be a much bigger issue. Like if Marchand isn't taking well to it, or there's a disconnect there between head coach and captain, then you are talking about a much bigger problem, and then you are, I think, starting to go down the road of, like if a coach's message isn't getting through, and it's not even getting through to the captain and through the captain, then you need to like seriously assess the coaching situation and whether Montgomery is still the right guy. Now, I don't think that's what has happened here. I think the fact that they, again, based on what the reporters who were at Sunday's practice said and what Montgomery said after, I say the fact that the captains, including Marchand, were vocal and were kind of bringing it to the team on Sunday tells me the message did get through and that, they're still on the same page. But it's definitely, it's something to monitor. And again, this is the situation that I would say like the Bruins front office has put them in by not making a decision on Montgomery before the season and allowing this to kind of go into the regular season. And who knows how long this continues where he doesn't have a contract. And again, Montgomery can say all the right things. He said, he's a day-to-day guy and he's not thinking about his own future and all that. But like, you're human. Like, if you don't have job security, of course you're thinking about it. That's anyone in any profession.
And Bridget, who did the Bruins hire in the offseason as their assistant coach?
Leach.
Right. So it's almost like kind of what people have mentioned that online as well, where they say, well, Bruins ownership and management kind of put a team in place that is not too dissimilar to Bruce Cassidy being around when Claude Julien was still around. Like you put your head coach around assistant coaches who have head coach experience in the National Hockey League. It's just like a don't get too comfortable move that the Bruins already made. Now, obviously, Jay Leach brings a professionalism and an expertise that they clearly value, but I'm just saying I don't think that wasn't part of their reasoning as well.
Well, yeah, not only brought Jay Leach back, but also elevated Joe Sacco to associate head coach. And Sacco and Leach they both interviewed when Cassidy got fired. And I think at least Sacco was one of the finalists. And I think Leach was among the last 3 or 4 candidates as well. Like, I don't know if he made it to the very end, but yeah, it's like, those are 2 guys that the front office has looked at before as potential head coaches. So absolutely, there's that pressure too.
Did you guys? If we're done with the coach part of it, there were some other takeaways I had from the Utah game that wasn't just like related to being slow or not or messing up some individual plays. But I know Scott has one about Zadorov, but I'll go first. The fourth line, Scott alluded to it a little bit earlier, still playing the best of their lines. And one of the things coach said after Sunday's practice was somebody asked him, like, would you consider moving Koepke up the lineup because he's playing so well? Like, would you consider breaking up the fourth line and mixing things up a little bit to try to boost offense other places? And he said, I'd rather keep the fourth line together. Maybe I need to give them 16 minutes instead of 12 minutes. So that's an option, I guess. Treat them like they're your third line, or the minutes they definitely deserve to have those extra minutes based on how they've played so far.
Yeah, and that's kind of already happened. Like that line's getting the last couple games has been getting more ice time than the quote unquote third line. All 3 of them had more ice time than Patra and Brazeau last game. Geeky had just a few seconds more than them, but yeah, like that they're already playing more. So that maybe you ramp it up even more than that. Like again, they're still all around like 12, 30, 13 minutes. So maybe you build in even a couple more minutes on top of that. But he's kind of already treating them like the third line, and Patra and whoever else he puts around Patra on the third line is getting treated more like the fourth line at least in terms of ice time.
Yeah, I mean, what was the stat recently that they 5-on-5 are the best? It may still be the best line in hockey, let alone on the Bruins.
By quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, at what point do we stop referring to them as the Bruins' fourth line? Right. I mean, obviously, but yeah, they've been great. It's look, Scott's opening shift. The middle six has been offensively next to invisible. I believe it was, so I said this to you guys before the podcast, but Matt Patra, Justin Brazeau, Morgan Geeky, Trent Frederick, Charlie Coyle, the 5 of them have a combined 4 points in 25 combined games between the 5 of them. The other member of that middle 6 technically would be Brad Marchand, who has 4 points. So that would go up a little bit, but all the players I mentioned have at least 1 point or less. And that's just not good enough. I don't care what line combination that they put out there. on the point of line combinations, were you guys surprised to see Trent Frederick taken off that line with Marchand and Coyle after having a strong game in Colorado? We thought, maybe they're trying to give Patra some beef on the wings, but just seemed like a classic. Like if it's that was your best second line all year, why'd you go away from that? But I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
I almost think it's just a handedness thing as much as anything, because if you're sitting Max Jones and Riley Tufte, then Trent Frederick's like the only other left shot who can play left wing. So he kind of has to be on the third line by default then in that scenario. So I guess you could have kept Frederick up there. Maybe you keep Max Jones in the lineup and keep one of Geeky or Brazeau on the bench. I don't think Geeky or Brazeau, they didn't come back into the lineup playing the way you would have hoped. Like, doesn't seem like that really jolted either one of them. I thought they were both pretty invisible in that Utah game. So they have so much to figure out, and Montgomery's trying different combinations. Ultimately, like, there's just so many guys in that top 9 right now that just have to play better. Just like, period, just flat out. I mean, the top 9 forwards, again, as they're listed on the depth chart, so I'm counting the fourth line as the fourth line. The top 3 lines combined for 5 shots on goal at 5-on-5 in that Utah game. 9 guys, 5 shots. Like, it's just completely unacceptable. None of them had more than 1. Like, that just can't happen. And that's, you can mess with the combinations all you want, but like at some point, it's like those guys just have to be better. Period.
And I also want to shout out Utah because I saw some people saying, "Oh, the Bruins, they suck losing to an expansion team." I mean, let's just clarify real quick. It was a relocation. Utah has been together in Arizona, obviously building something for quite some time with some high draft picks. They actually, were a preseason playoff pick for me, and I know for some others, their speed and skill is, if you want to look at a modern NHL team, I would say look at Utah, like where the league's going, because most teams have some really fast players. I mean, Edmonton for sure, but up and down Utah's lineup, they're very quick. Now, what wins in the playoffs? Well, the Florida Panthers. I would say Utah is faster than Florida. Does that mean that Utah's better? No. But the speed and skill that Utah possesses clearly gave Boston problems. And is it a Utah thing or a Boston thing or somewhere in between? Can the Bruins play faster than what they're showing? Absolutely. They just have to get there.
Yeah, and it seems like, I mean, we're talking about like our guys getting the message, and really right now it seems like the fourth line is the only line that's got the message and not needed to have it reiterated to them. They've just been very consistent. They just know their role, they do it, they're consistent. They're never the ones you're yelling at like through your TV, like, oh, what the heck. They bring exactly what they need to bring, which is being physical and scoring. Scoring more so than I think anyone thought they would be able to.
Yeah, that they're the only line that is consistently playing north, arriving on time on the forecheck, possessing the puck, and then getting it to the net. And it's like, that should be a fairly simple formula that other lines can replicate, but they're not. They're playing too slow through the neutral zone and on the forecheck. They're not holding on to pucks, and then even when they do hold on to pucks, they're not doing a good enough job getting it on net. They're looking for the perfect play too much. And yeah, it's like something you would think seeing the fourth line success would, like, set off a light bulb of like, hey, that seems to be working. Maybe we should do that. And it just doesn't really seem to be happening. It's like, it's almost like too many other guys think they're better than that. Like they can do something different. And it's like, no, you're right now, none of you are better than that. So like, just try the simple thing.
That Scott, I was thinking that exact same thing, because what I was just going to mention was that the one thing that the Bruins fourth line members all have that you can't teach X's and O's in a video session or in practice is desperation. None of those guys Cole Koepke has never been a mainstay NHLer to this point in his career. Every shift he's skating for his job, his livelihood. Mark Kastelik was a fourth line guy in Ottawa that was a cast off in a trade for a number one goalie. They don't think much of him. Okay, I'm going to prove everybody wrong and show what I can do. Johnny Beecher is a young player who is entering what will surely be his first full season in the National Hockey League. There's no entitlement. There's no complacency. But you watch David Pastrnak out there. He knows he's a 60-goal scorer in the National Hockey League. But guess what? Sometimes that leads to not doing what that mentality leads to not doing the little things right. Like I watch David Pastrnak, and he looks like a player right now who's kind of coasting around knowing that it's a long season and that he wants to be playing his best hockey later on than maybe in October, because I haven't loved his body language. Pastrnak is not just a gifted goal scorer and passer. He's a guy who's played, despite what many will say about him, being a turnover machine and everything. I actually think Pastrnak has always played with a bit of grit to his game and a willingness to engage in battles. Right now, he's kind of showing that like OV sitting in his office all game, where he's waiting for the puck to come to him because that's just where his mindset is right now. Like he's not being assertive. He's being reactionary. And when the puck doesn't get to him or it leaves the zone or he has a bad play, the shoulders are shrugging. He's kind of like, I just haven't loved his body language. And yeah, Scott, I definitely think that whether it's subconscious or not, I think a lot of players skate around the ice thinking that they're too good, they're too skilled for what that effective, simple style is what the fourth line's playing. And as soon as your best players realize that they're not above playing the right way, that's when you'll have success up and down the lineup. I mean, again, just look at the Florida Panthers. Like their best players aren't afraid to play the right way, no matter how much skill they have compared to their fourth liners. So it's a mindset thing, and I think they got to get over it.
Yeah, and it's disappointing from Pastrnak especially because I thought he was awesome in that Kings game. Like I thought he was playing the right way. I thought he did have grit. I thought he was like doing everything right all over the ice. And then Florida, Utah, it just kind of like even Colorado game, like it just sort of disappeared. And like you're right, like he kind of went to this more sort of stationary floating game, and it's like not like David Pastrnak can't be bringing it 1 out of every 3 or 4 games. Like it's got to be you can absolutely excuse the occasional night off, but it's got to be on way more often than it's off.
And Montgomery wasn't afraid to call out Pasta in the playoffs last year. I'm sure he, would be vocal with him again if he thought he needed to. But yeah, it's kind of funny because the record isn't bad, but you're seeing bad habits all throughout the 6 games in the season. Besides really from that fourth line, which is unexpected. I think we probably thought Cole Koepke maybe was going to be like a up and down kind of guy. He definitely won't clear waivers now if you try to send him down. And to just like to explain to people if they don't really know his background.
I mean, he's your leading scorer.
Hey, he's a point per game guy.
Yeah.
He's got 6 points in 6. He's got 3 goals, 3 assists in 6 games. His best year stats before this was he had a goal in 17 games, which was his career high for both of those categories 2 years ago when he was with Tampa Bay. And last year he only played 9 pro games with Tampa, so he's only 3 games away from that. He had no goals then. I don't know. His stats, if you looked in the past, it's completely different than what he's doing now. And the good news, and Scott, you said this last podcast, is it's completely repeatable. Like the success that they're having is sustainable. Like the scoring might not necessarily be, but the habits that they have and how they're able to play their game, like I don't see any reason why that would really need to change the way that line is doing things now. Now, are you going to see him score in half of the games this season? Probably not, but that's the pace he's on right now.
Yeah, Scott, you broke down Koepke's NHL career numbers prior to this year, right? It was like 6 points in 20s. What was it?
No, it was 3 points in 26 games.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Bridget, to your point about like how their record's not bad, like Montgomery said as much after practice yesterday. He said you look around the league, like the good teams are off to slow starts. He said we're 3-2-1. He says, but it's about he said, but I'm not interested in the record or the standings at this moment. I'm interested in the process, and that's been lacking is more or less what he was saying. So he sees the big picture. I just and you know if I'm gonna bring up Pasternak on that top line, I want to bring up Elias Lindholm at the same time because I feel like Elias Lindholm, I think he is doing the little things so far. Again, he's in a new system. He's trying to learn chemistry with new teammates, new systems, all that stuff. You
I
pick up your
thought you were
life,
going to say chemistry.
chemistry.
You
I
almost
I
did.
always forget with chemistry. But your life is in Calgary. You move to Vancouver mid-season, then you move across the continent to Boston. You have a kid. So Elias Lindholm has a lot going on in his life on and off the ice, but I feel like his game, at least defensively, has been pretty strong at least as each game goes along here. Zach has been quiet. We talked about Pasternak. So, we talk about the middle six having struggles. That first line has some struggles too, but I don't want to put that on Elias Lindholm because I feel like he's been doing his job so far.
Yeah, I think he has. Like, I think you're right. I think individually his game has been pretty solid. It is that line chemistry. I mean, Pasternak said it before they went out on the road when, I think that was Tuesday that we talked to him, and he said, the communication hasn't been great. They've been too spaced out at times, and they just need to build their chemistry. Um, and but I think you're still seeing that. Like now, you're 2 games into this road trip, and it doesn't really seem like it's gotten a whole lot better. Like they still kind of look like all of that. Like they still look spaced out, disconnected. Um, Again, like some of it's effort, some of it's is just getting better at knowing each other's game and where everyone is. And like I think it's gonna come. I just think those 3 players are, they're too good to not figure it out. And I feel like their games should complement each other well enough. So I still think it's gonna happen, but it's tough right now because it doesn't really look like it's getting a whole lot better. Like these last 2 games weren't an improvement from what Pasternak was talking about a week ago. So like that can be frustrating for sure.
So how much time would you guys give them as a line before maybe switching things up? Would you give it another month? Because if the middle six continues to struggle and the not maybe at the same rate that they are, but just in general, and then if the first line isn't getting that chemistry where it needs to be, then do you do Pasternak and Marchand just to get the two of them going for a little bit, and whether that's between Lindholm or somebody else?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you shake them up, it may be more because the second line isn't doing enough, or the middle six needs an injection of one of those players to get it going. So yeah, I mean, you could potentially see that happening where you have a line that has, maybe it's even Pasternak, Coyle, and Marchand together, and then you have Lindholm and Zaka with someone else from the middle six that you want to put next to them. But they definitely, my hot take or whatever the section that we had in our predictions, what my our bold prediction or whatever, was that line could be one of the top 5 lines in the NHL, and they do not look like that so far. But the potential is, I see
I thought I
potential.
heard you say Beecher Castle Kepke was going to be one of the top 5
Yeah.
lines in the
That's what
NHL.
I heard.
If I said that, you guys would have been like, okay, someone get her to rehab because she's definitely on something. But no, like the potential is there, and Elias Lindholm has been doing those little things right, like you mentioned, Brian. One of the things I like about his game so far is he'll win a face-off and he'll go right to the net and either be screening or trying to deflect pucks. And he's playing pretty simply, and he's playing his role. And I think that if he starts shooting more, he's going to be able to get his stick on pucks and redirect stuff and make it harder for goalies. He's been pretty good at faceoffs so far. He's over 50%. I was just looking at the faceoff numbers. Kastelik is at 61%. That's
He's
amazing.
the best player in hockey.
Yeah, that's very good. And that, I mean, that's better than Lindholm. I think that's better than everyone on the Bruins for centers. But I guess Patra somehow has 81% right now, but he hasn't taken a lot of faceoffs, so that's why. But yeah, I think that line still has that really high end potential. I would be hesitant to break them up, at least yet. I think they do get more time together.
Yeah, I think if they're gonna get split up or there's gonna be a shakeup, I would like the idea of it happening in game. Like if there's a game where they're especially quiet or giving up chances against, not generating, and so Montgomery decides, with 8 minutes left in the second period, this isn't going well. I just need to shake it up, right? Like maybe it's this next game Tuesday in Nashville. If they play the way they did in Utah, I could see something like that. And maybe whatever you shake it up to starts to click and gets going in the third period. And then you keep that together for the next game and see how it goes. Like that would feel natural to me, and that I would be very okay with. I think, when you change up lines in practice, sometimes it's not as effective because it just gets guys kind of thinking too much. Whereas, when you change it up in game, which I think Montgomery does more of that than the change it going into a practice anyways. Sometimes you can just kind of capture lightning in a bottle and something clicks and guys aren't overthinking it, and then you can just roll with it. So I would be okay with that. But otherwise, going into this Nashville game, I would keep that line together. But if they're struggling in game and you need some sort of jolt in the second or third period, I wouldn't hesitate to shake things up.
Bridget, let's talk about the defense because I know you had a take on Zadorov that you wanted to mention.
It was a Scott take that
take?
Yes, that I had heard. Did he text us this? I don't know. Sometimes I don't remember where I see. Did he tweet it? Did he text us it?
I did tweet something about Zadorov. I mean,
think that must be it.
Yeah, he's taken at least one penalty in every game this season, and he leads the NHL in penalties. Now he led the NHL in penalties last year. So this is unfortunately something you have to deal with, but he's still got to clean it up some. You can't be in the box every game. That just isn't gonna cut it. It hurts the team. It does. So, they can have a good penalty kill, and some penalties he takes are gonna be worth it. Some probably aren't gonna be deserved. Some are gonna be just because he's bigger than another guy and overpowers him.
Yeah, the other day he got the extra penalty in the fight. They got him for a slash before the fight. And he was in the box for a power play goal against, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but he did slash the guy, so
I think Utah's a better example, Scott, of what you're talking about. I think I forget who it was against Utah, but it looked more like a stick on stick lift type situation.
Yeah, I mean that's what everyone said. I actually did think he rode up to the hands at one point, but
okay,
I don't know. Maybe I didn't get a good enough angle of it.
But your point is still he's going to get penalties for being bigger and stronger as well. But in general, he has to cut back on some of the stupid penalties.
Yeah, or not even. I mean, honestly, not even just stupid, but just being careful with how you're using your stick and what you're doing. Too many of these have been stick fouls from him, so that has to get cleaned up. I also think he's. I think I said on one of our recent podcasts, I think he's been fine so far. Fine, okay, kind of came to mind. And then I feel since then he's had a couple of rougher games, and maybe I would start to swing a little lower than that. And the penalties are part of it, but there's just been some plays where I think he's made bad decisions. He's had a couple clears on the penalty kill that he hasn't gotten all the way down the ice that have allowed regroups in the neutral zone. He had a play in the Utah game where he was coming out of the zone and he was coming up the middle of the ice, and he had McAvoy to one side, and I think it was Marchand to the other. 2 clear passing lanes. And for some reason, he tried a stretch pass up the middle that went up a Utah stick and out of play. And it was like, that's just overthinking it. Like, you had 2 very like wide open passing lanes, and instead you went for the home run, got deflected out of play. Now it's a defensive zone faceoff.
Well, he did mention on the What Chaos podcast with Pete Blackburn and DJ Bean that it takes him about 10 games probably. He said, give me 10 games with the new team and the new surroundings. That's what he said from the horse's mouth. So I guess he's got 4 games left until that benchmark. But I think the moral of the story is, I just think there's certain players where it might just take some time. It doesn't mean that your critique and observations to this point, Scott, aren't valid and true. I think some players in my mind right now are probably going to get the benefit of the doubt because they haven't been around. But for the players that have been around, they should know better and whatnot. And maybe part of it is, guys. Maybe part of it is they do know that they've gotten off to good starts, and maybe they want to pace themselves a little bit. You know what I mean? Maybe there's something like that going on. But I think you're playing with fire if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, like
with a different goalie situation, which is something we brought up before, because that was something that was able to get you more points last year than you're probably looking at this year.
Yeah, you were able to steal a lot more games in previous seasons. Now, in this case, like if you're looking at the Utah game, you score 1 goal, so even a great goalie is gonna have trouble stealing you that game. But yeah, like you're right. Like the record is 3-2-1 isn't that bad. Like at least you're not. By the way, I mentioned they're playing Nashville Tuesday. They are 0-5. Like that's a team with Stanley Cup aspirations that is in like getting very close to dire straits. Like if they start 0-6, like that is already such an uphill battle to be a play. Like I know that sounds reactionary, and the Oilers pulled themselves out of it last year, but that's kind of the exception to the rule. Like, generally, when you start that poorly, it is really hard to dig out. The Avalanche got off to a terrible start. They're 2-4, so they're maybe clawing their way back a little. The Oilers are 2-4. Like, so you're at least in better shape record wise, but yeah, it's it is that like the last 2 years they got off to such great starts that it was like you got to November and you're like, okay, I know this team's making the playoffs, and now we have 5 months to figure out how they're going to look once they get there. It's not a given every year, and this might be a year where they're not going to pull away from the pack. Like maybe we're not going to be able to confidently say on November 10th that they're 100% in the playoffs and they already have, an 8-point gap. Like, it might be more of a grind. And if they're going to, start to separate from that, like they're going to have to play better. Just to go back to my opening take, like they're going to have to generate way more offensively. And that's guys individually being better, but it's also just playing better as a team to get more chances.
Well, if you look at the standings right now, the Bruins are second place in the Atlantic Division. But if you're going off of winning percentage, they're 5th in the Atlantic Division. So, and obviously they're 12th in the NHL, 4th in the Eastern Conference. That same exercise would carry out to both of those as well. So, yeah, like they're 3-2-1, but with games played discrepancies and just the eye test alone. Look, I don't think anybody on this podcast is being anything other than just reactionary to what's in front of us. But no one, I'll speak for myself. I'm not panicking. It's super early, but again, we have to break this down because it's what's in front of us, and clearly they need to get better. And I think everybody and their mother knows that. So it starts tomorrow in Nashville. But I didn't want to gloss over any final takeaways you guys have from the Utah game in particular, or just elsewhere in the world of hockey, Bruins.
Just one guy that like popped up in my notes a few times for not great reasons was Mason Lohrei. Unfortunately, like I thought he's had an up and down start. Like it feels like every game he's involved one way or another, and offensively we all love what he brings, and he's probably been their most dangerous threat from the blue line. So like I want him in the lineup, but some of the defensive stuff he has to clean up. Like he had a couple bad turnovers in that game. The whole team was struggling to get out of the zone, most of the game, but especially the first period. But I thought Lohrei in particular, was really struggling under Utah's forecheck. And it's, you know, Montgomery said after that Utah does play like Florida in terms of the forechecking. And it's like, yeah, that's what you have to learn how to beat. You have to learn how to make plays under that kind of forechecking pressure. And Lohrei's struggled at that. So, just it stood out a couple times in that game. And it's something, again, he has to work on, and he will. I think he's going to be fine. And I still have very high expectations for Lohrei overall. But yeah, that didn't look great.
Yeah, luckily that is teachable, and they've been going over that in practice. I know, Brian, a few days ago you tweeted out when you were at Warrior, watching them run the high pressure check drills against some of their younger guys like Lohrei on the ice for that, getting pressured by Casta, like running that fourth line pressure and their forecheck against the Bruins defensemen.
Yeah, they did work on forechecking, and it was 2D in a center going back to collective dump in and a forward line forechecking. And I mean, look, that's just the practices, Scott and Bridget. I don't know if you have an opinion on how they're practicing, but at the end of the day, you can practice all you want. You gotta nothing simulates a game like a game, and I just think that when they get out for I don't think what the Bruins need to do right now is have Jim Montgomery put the Bruins on the goal line and just do Herbies for an hour. I don't. It's not even that they're not practicing hard enough or the endurance isn't there. It's when they go out there in the games, they're overthinking. Simply put, and I don't mean to condescend or oversimplify, especially on a podcast where people want opinions, but they need to just start playing hockey. They're overthinking. They need to start playing. And when you're acting instead of reacting, that's winning hockey. Right now, the Bruins are reacting to what's happening in front of them instead of taking the game to their opponents, or at least meeting them halfway. So again, what's the cause for that? There's probably a bunch of reasons early in the season: rust, lack of chemistry, execution, and effort at times. But I think they have the personnel. We've seen it. People have mentioned, well, Brazo's slow, middle six isn't that good. They're like, look, the Bruins had a lesser roster last year, got off to a 10-1 start, went to the second round of the playoffs, brought the Stanley Cup champions, eventual Stanley Cup champions, to Game 6, and was probably their best test. I know the Oilers took the Panthers to Game 7, but prior to that comeback, it was the Bruins that were the biggest test. So I think the Bruins have a personnel that's definitely much better than what they're showing, to say the least, and they have to get to it, and they have to get to it quick.
Do you guys have any? I was going to say, do you have any thoughts on Swayman so far? Because that's one area we haven't really talked about too much.
I think he's been good. I mean, I thought he was really good in that game against Utah. I will say, for as much trouble as the Bruins had getting out of the zone, I didn't think they gave up a ton of great chances. And if you go on natural stat trick, that was kind of reflected. They didn't give up a lot of high danger chances in that game. I thought Swayman still faced a couple, and he still faced some tough shots from the even from the outside with traffic in front or whatever. So I thought Swayman was really good in that game. I thought they, for the most part, did a good job kind of taking away tips or guys banging away at rebounds in front of them. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think we've seen him be great yet. Again, very early, but you probably wouldn't be calling him a Vezina leader early in the season or anything. But I think he's been fine. I think he's been solid. I thought he was really good Saturday in Utah. So I think that there's definitely still another level there for Swayman, but nothing that I'm worried about.
Which, by the way, that was your bold prediction of the season, wasn't it?
Yep, winning the Vezina.
Mine's looking pretty decent at the moment. I'm hoping I'm dead wrong about mine, but I think mine was that people would be disappointed in Patra potentially. Was that what my bold
Yeah, it
prediction
was
was?
about the injury mostly, like, trying to come back from the injury issues he's had. And then obviously he missed the beginning of the season too.
Yeah, I think that was like player who could underachieve. I'm
Oh,
forgetting right now what you're.
my bold prediction was not. Yeah, my bold prediction is not looking good. My bold prediction was that the Bruins would have twice as many 20-goal scorers as they did last year. I think it was going to go
Oh
from like
yeah.
4 to 8 or
Yeah,
something
that
like
was
that.
well,
Let's start with 8 1-goal scorers, and then we'll go for 20.
who knew Cole Koepke would be on your 20-goal scorers,
Yeah,
but he might be.
Well, that's right. It's like you might not get Zaka, Geeky, Frederick. Those guys might not get there, but Kastlik and Kepke are both going to score 20. So
yeah, yep. All right. So as I mentioned, the Bruins are in Nashville. They play the Predators on Tuesday night. So we'll see if the Bruins can start to play again. I don't think anybody here is looking for a game where they play like shit but get 2 points. Like that'll be. I mean, you'll take the 2 points in the standings, I suppose, but that's not what's most important right now. It's how you're playing. So I would rather. This is gonna sound crazy. I would rather see the Bruins play an excellent game tomorrow and just not get the bounces and lose than win a game that they didn't deserve to be in. Because it is about the process over the results at this stage. I know that you need the points, but my point is if you're
Not if
playing
you're
the right way,
Nashville.
if you're playing the right way, the points they will accumulate is where I'm getting at. So it's more sustainable.
Yeah,
So we'll
and
see if they start that.
I wonder how desperate Nashville looks with the
I
situation
mean,
that they're in.
you would have to think like they're going to look like the most desperate team in the world. Like I can't imagine that team possibly coming out flat. Like if they do, then there are so many bigger issues. Like it is kind of baffling because that team has leadership. Like you have O'Reilly, Stamkos, Yossi. Like
Marcia, so
yeah, it's fast. Like I actually haven't watched very much of Nashville at all. Like for whatever reason, they just haven't been a team I've clicked onto on ESPN Plus when I'm searching through games each night. So I'm actually really interested to see what that team looks like because on paper and record wise, they look like an absolute mess.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think they will come out with their best effort. So the Bruins are gonna have to match that energy, and I think they will. I think you're gonna get two teams that are, they know that they gotta bring it, and one team's gonna walk away with the win, and one team won't. But I guess we'll find out who that is. But Bridget and Scott, unless you have anything left to cover, I think we can probably sign out at this point. Yeah.
All good for me.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for listening. Enjoy Bruins Predators on Tuesday and have a great rest of your work week. We'll talk to you on Wednesday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.